Well, good morning. It's my privilege to introduce you to Bruno and Kathleen Soucy this morning. I first met the Soucys back in 2006 at their home in Riverview as they were preparing to go to Rwanda as global field staff with CBM and all that entailed for them and their family. They are my friends, mentors, and confidants. We have laughed, cried, prayed, built cross-cultural relationships, and shared ministry experiences through Sent teams, all the while growing in God's love, grace through faith. They are no strangers to most of you at River Cross, as they are one of our partners in mission. We have prayed for them and financially supported them. In 2017, as we, River Cross, began exploring the possibility of a partnership in El Salvador, the Soucys walked with us. In 2018, a three-person visioning team consisting of Pastor John, Dr. Mike Howlett, and myself were sent to discern if God was calling our church to become involved in a long-term partnership with CBM and Enlace around engaging in Christian community development work. During that period of visit, we experienced God at work firsthand through His people building His kingdom. River Cross has recently sent two other teams. Bruno and Kathleen have served faithfully, following God's leading in Rwanda, Bolivia, and currently in Guatemala as the Latin American Caribbean team leaders for the past 10 years. Through their cross-cultural experience, in their words, one of the most rewarding aspects of our work with CBM is bringing people together from diverse cultures and backgrounds with different ways of worshiping and experiencing God, leading the local church and impacting the community. I will leave for them to share about family. So please give a warm River Cross welcome to our friends Bruno and Kathleen as they share what God has placed on their hearts. Welcome and God bless you.
Thank you, Linda. Well, thank you so much. That's great to be here and to see so many faces that we've never seen before. For us, it's a real privilege to be able to share with you this morning and share a little bit about who we are, what God is doing in the areas that we have the privilege to serve Him, and also how we're doing that together with you, River Cross, as a supporting church. So as Linda had shared, our journey began back in 2006. And at that time, our 12-year-old son said to me, "You know, Mom, you don't have to sell everything and move to Africa to share Jesus." And he was right, but that's exactly what we did. And when we left we left Canada, we had 3 children, and today we still have 3 children, which is a bonus, I think. We're really thankful for that. But our families morphed a little bit over those times, and for those of you who might know us, we have 3 children, Benjamin, Laura, and Carolyn, and we are expecting our 9th grandchild at the end of October. So I share these pictures simply because that one in the middle is the last time that everybody's been together in one place. And so it's been 6 years since we've all been together, and we're going to be able to repeat that experience on the long weekend coming up. And I'm just sharing that too because I know certainly in the first service and here also, I know there are many people that are far from their families. And we've lived that way for almost 20 years. And I just want to encourage you, that it is possible to keep those ties strong, even when you're not close to your family in a physical way. And I don't want to take anything away from my kids that have supported us and encouraged us through this time. So just wanted to share that part.
So much of the work we do actually is a question of justice. So that this verse was key to us when we left. It's still key to us. So Micah 6:8. He has shown you what is good and what does the Lord require of you, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. And that's a daily thing for us, is to remember to stay humble, remember to focus on God, and see where He takes us every day. Talking about justice, it's a key concept. So much of the work that we do really is based, whether it's poverty or corruption or all the sorts of inequities that are there, it really is a question of justice. Matthew 25 is no doubt familiar to many of you, should be, and it's, again, key work for the kinds of things that we're doing. For I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And that idea is key for so much of our work, is working with local churches to be salt and light, to be the hands and feet, to be those who are with people who are in need. Just talking a little bit about CBM. It's the mission arm. I think most of you are in the Baptist world long enough to know. Canadian Baptist Ministries is the mission arm and the heart. I used to say it was the arm, now I say it's the arm and the heart, because we are the representatives for Canadian Baptist churches throughout the world where we are working. There's a few distinctives, and we'll tell a few stories and just to illustrate this a little bit, but just focus on those key words. So the initiatives, the work that we do is always owned and implemented by the local church, wherever we are, and in partnership and in reinforcing the practice of integral mission. So those are key words for us and how we do what we do and why we do it that way. And hopefully you'll have an understanding of what that is once we get through some of our slides here. Some people say, why the church? You've probably seen other organizations that do good works in communities, Christians who do good work, but do it outside of the church. And there's a reason why we think that the church has to be core for everything we do. First of all, it's in God's mandate that the church, the bride of Christ, the church is the focus and the center of accomplishing God's mission. And then as well, we also believe that in many of the places where we are, the church is core to the community, to the context, that's the things that are happening there, and they will be there long after we are not, or other organizations that come in and do good works, they leave, the church stays. So if we can build a church, that's really key for us to be continuing to do that. The other key word that we had there was partnership, and again, that's not an idea, a concept that all organizations are working through and with. So we really believe that, first of all, we have the mandate to work with the church, to do that, which means then we have to submit, we have to collaborate with the local church. And we also think that local ownership, and again, there's classic examples of community development initiatives where people come in, do good things, but the local folks do not own it, and it fails eventually. And so we really believe that that's key for us, is to include and just have the local people integral to the work we're doing. We love to learn from each other. That's a big piece of the north-south kind of connections that we have. We have a privilege to see things that you would never see in the Canadian context, and likewise, there's a way for us to share some of our Canadian understandings and experiences with our friends in the south. And fortunately, Canada doesn't have a huge colonial history, which probably is a good thing. So we also get to be with people that we can just understand that we come from the north, we have stuff, we have resources, we have education, and it's very important to listen and to be walking with people rather than trying to tell them what to do. Around the idea of partnership, this is probably like a simple drawing of a classic model. So CBM is working with several different partners around the world. We learn from them, they learn from us, we share, they share, and then we share those learnings and those understandings with other partners. And that's kind of how we've worked for a long time. What's evolved over the last couple years in Latin America, probably the last 10 years in Africa, is this whole idea of a model of collaboration. So CBM then becomes one of the players in that network of sharing and learning and being together. And that's been a really encouraging piece that's being developing in Latin America. It's a long-term effort to get people to change how they see things. But we're seeing some movement this way where individual partners can share with one another. So of course we still continue to be part of that connection and sharing and learning and just collaborating between all of our partners. But there's also some direct connection between our partners, which is really warms our heart to see partners that share joys and challenges between themselves, and we learn about it as opposed to being the ones who drive it. Just to share a little bit about what's happening in Central America, Bolivia, the Caribbean. So we talk about the LAC, Latin American Caribbean region. There's a lot going on, and we are really privileged to be there. The Latin American church, in some ways, probably there's some similarities to Canada, but a lot of differences. We are working in a very, very Christian context. So Christian in the broader sense, it's the colonials brought in Catholicism, and so there's a lot of people who understand God, understand Jesus, so we're working with that. But if we take it down to the next level, the evangelicals are people who are followers of Jesus directly. In many of the places where we work, 40, 50% of the population are believers. And yet, the incongruence with that, and that's a big part of our work, is the idea that if there are so many believers here, how come this culture, this society is corrupt, is poor, is violent, and all the inequities that go with that? And it's like, it doesn't compute. If there's so many believers, how come there doesn't appear to be an impact on society? And that's a big part of our work. Part of it is this mentality of church being a refuge. In the Spanish language, when you talk about church, the building, it's called the temple. So you could also make that connection that, well, God is in here, but we're not sure he's outside. And so that's a big part of our work, is helping the church understand God is everywhere. And the church is not a club and a refuge. And in fact, we need to have the doors open in order to have impact on the world. We're going to talk about worldview. It's the idea, could call it the kingdom view as well. The idea that what is our ultimate destination? And we all believe that we will die someday, we will go to heaven, and that's the glory that we hope for. But that doesn't mean that life today is terrible, and then someday I will die, and then I get to go to heaven. We believe that we are on the road to heaven. We're building the kingdom today, and so that has a different an impact on how you see the world. So we just talk a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing in that part of the world too.
I can share a little bit about our various partners in Latin America and the Caribbean. You know, when Bruno and I started down this road, Bolivia was next to India. Is our oldest partner of about 100 and, I'm going to say this wrong, but well over 100 years. And then we had a small partnership in Cuba that was growing, and a small partnership in El Salvador. So now today there's 10 partners and we're in the Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Bolivia, El Salvador, and Guatemala. So for us to see that evolution has been exciting. And that takes us into the partnership that we have with Enlace, where we have connected in your church, Rivercross. And just as Bruno and I first got to know Rivercross, we met with John Knight, your community pastor, who he invited us to come and get to know the church, see the church. And so we met at what was your original church building, and I went to take my coat off to go sit down somewhere because I thought we were going to be talking about the church. And he said, no, leave your coat on. And we didn't go inside, we went outside. And that was the first sign that we had that, okay, this church is in the community, where we visited the stores, the health center, the park, all the places where the church has its tentacles here in St. John. And so for us, it was really important that we expose partners to healthy partners. partners, and vice versa. So our Enlace works in El Salvador and Guatemala as well, and they work to empower the local church to be agents of transformation in their community. So that's not always an easy thing to do. Imagine if you were an illiterate woman in a patriarchal society. How is it that you can have the courage or the ability, the confidence to go to local authorities and talk about some of the needs in your community, or to connect with other community leaders? It's very difficult. But these pictures show you that things do change, and the Enlace churches that go through this process are accompanied along this healthy model. They learn how to do that, and they get grounded in the Bible as well, so that they're well able to serve in this way. And so as a result, they've built bridges so that kids can walk safely to school, and they do this with the community, not just the church. That other photo, I don't know how clear it is, but you see John Knight waving from inside a building. So just so you know, he's just coming out of the outhouse. That was, and that was, and when I was in this community, I said, so what are you guys going to be working on with the church? And the church leader said, oh, we don't know quite yet, because we haven't finished speaking to all the different people, to get everybody on board with the same thing. But in this community, having good sanitation, safety for people that went out at night to use the bathroom, that there would be an outhouse in every home. And so John, as well as a number of people in this congregation, were a part of building those. And an example of an Enlace church, we just take you into Guatemala, and this is, common in both Guatemala and El Salvador, of course. I don't know if you can see that, but that community has gates all around it. And in this is one way to kind of keep control who gets in and who gets out, and for the people in there to be safe. Well, the church that's on the left there, our friend Byron, a pastor of this church, that church is intimately known in this community because they're allowed in those gates. The families know them. People know who they are, and they know who their neighbors are. And therefore, they know the needs. And so because of that, they're able to do things as a church and to be out there where people are challenged to have an income, to have healthy lives. And in that way, they've had huge impact. So even though we talked, Bruno mentioned about the church being a temple and with the doors closed, these churches are learning how to be absolutely the opposite. We talk a lot about what we do. And of course, we know that God is in all of these efforts, for sure. We join him in his work, but we also have a big team with us as well. And so in the communities where we are, we have national field staff. Our friend Byron Velasquez in the front doing the selfie is with us in El Salvador and Guatemala. His presence enables us to do things that we wouldn't normally be able to do, to speak with people we would not normally speak with, because that's his community. We have Tim and Callie Hutton, who are in Bolivia. We have Catherine Scott, some of you might know. She's from just outside Fredericton, and she's serving with a focus on youth in the Dominican Republic. And then we have colleagues that actually live in Canada, but serve all the region of Latin America. Just moving on to the type of work that we're joining God in these communities. CBM, back in the day, and I have to be careful what I say because Linda's Naves has been around back in the day a lot longer than we were. But at some point, I think CBM was very open to, you're a nurse, a doctor, and you have a passion for serving in a mission for God. So you'd come to CBM, and CBM would go, yes, we can use you here. But over the years, it just became much more effective to focus in on, well, what are the priorities as we see them in the countries where we're living and are working? So we've honed in on some of those to share with you today. So one, of course, is around the area of vulnerable children or children at risk. And so inevitably, education is a huge thing. I'm excited to think that I can't believe that teachers are going back to school tomorrow and students will be there in a week from now. Certainly, school looks a lot different in some of the communities where we live. Imagine where there are no supplies, where kids come sometimes, where teachers come sometimes, and it's not a daily. You don't earn enough money to really live well. But kids are kids everywhere. They have dreams about who they want to be, and do want to work and learn. However, most churches are there to provide after-school help and support so that kids can actually learn things and have them reinforced when, especially at home, they don't have that type of support because parents are often illiterate or working all the time. Another area that we focus in on is around the area of economic initiatives. Of course, you can't, most people work daily for their daily bread, so that if you're not out there working every day, you're not feeding your families. And so how does the church get involved to help support people to have a better life? So one of the areas, I'll just share a little bit about that older lady who's measuring cloth. And the church that's working there, all of these women live in the community. None of them come to church. Some of them are believers, some of them are not. But they spend a year together, and they learn how to sew pants, school uniforms, all types of things. But alongside that, they get what is called a Master's of Business in the Streets. So it's a program that helps them understand basic business practices so that they can actually operate their business. And then it's a very holistic, and we have an opportunity as well to do some trauma healing with these folks. I did not ask how many people here are from Latin America. And especially in Guatemala, El Salvador, the Civil War, the impacts of the Civil War, which has been over for many years, are still there, and the trauma of that still affects people. So being with people that have known each other for a year, working together, to be able to talk about forgiveness, about grief, and about how to take your wounds to the cross, it's very life-giving. Another area of focus for us, of course, to have healthy churches, you have to have healthy pastors. I mean, of course, it's a given. However, when pastors have failed marriages, when pastors face challenges, having to work outside of the church to provide for their families, all these types of things are heavy burdens. And we met a young fellow in Bolivia who was in a very dynamic church, and he was so on fire. But when we met him, he was struggling, and he said, I think I can't do this. I have to leave. I'm not coping. And he was having mental health issues, and there was nobody there to really support him. In Bolivia in particular, if you shared that your marriage was in trouble, your ministry is over. So it was very difficult for people to be open and vulnerable. So we have a program that is supported by our Bill Dick, who works out of Canada now, but he was living in Bolivia. And there's small mentoring groups and discipleship groups specifically for the purpose of developing healthy pastors.
I would say all of our partners are doing theological education in some form, whether that's a very formal seminary setting or a Bible institute. There's everything in between. And I would say each of our partners is struggling with how to stay relevant, how to stay financially viable, how to have impact in that way. And it's similar to the North American context. You've heard of seminaries here that are closing for different reasons. We've had conversations with most of our partners, and as an example, the Convention of Baptist Churches in Guatemala, I'd say this has been a 2-year adventure so far, and it's just now starting to see some movement. So we ask questions of, as far as training pastors or theological education, what do you want? Why do you do that? And so the question has to eventually come to, well, we want churches in communities that are relevant and that will have impact for the kingdom in those communities. And then you say, okay, so what kind of leaders do we need in order to have that kind of church that has impact? And then so we say, okay, so then this is the kind of leaders we have. How do we develop those leaders? What kind of training and experiences do they need to have to come and be effective in that thing? So we're working backwards, because the traditional model of theological education is that you teach people a whole bunch of stuff for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and you just keep putting it in, and then you hope that when those people graduate, they will be effective. But we're not sure, and so that's been a conversation that's been going on with us, and it's had gives us some satisfaction, some joy that we're seeing movement to start from the bottom end to say, okay, so what do we want, and then moving that way to train people appropriately.
So apologies to those seminary professors that might be in the audience that are referred to as teaching stuff. So we know it's much deeper than that. So another priority of CBMs is all in the area of creation care. And Bruno mentioned earlier about worldview and the idea that, one day we're not going to be in this world, so the need to look after it is maybe not top of mind for some people. When you walk down the street and drive in some of these countries, the level and amount of garbage is overwhelming to us. And I think it hits me more as we came back to Canada and got in our car to drive this way from Toronto. And at first I was like, Bruno, look at that. There's no garbage. You don't see any garbage. And then I started looking a little closer. So we do have some work to do here. There's a few cups and bags and things, but nothing to the extent of what we see where our home is located. And so the idea of working with at the level of the church to recycle and reuse and composting, these are things I know you have been doing here for a long time. And in fact, every time we come back to Canada and stay in different people's homes, I'm so uptight. I think I need to go back to school to learn how to do all this stuff again. You have so many boxes that you have to use, and only so much garbage gets to get sent out, so it's tense. But we need to learn that in the other countries where we are. So certainly picking up garbage and modeling that has been really important. But one aspect of creation care that has been really kind of had a lot of offshoots for us is in the Dominican Republic, where a lot of youth they don't often meet together because it's costly, there's distance involved. And so the program brought youth together over a number of weekends just to learn about, obviously, caring for garbage, but also reforestation, erosion, those things. And then they developed with their communities an action plan for what they were going to do. And you see some of them planting trees there. But the story that kind of came from that for me was that these youth are now being the leaders in the churches for their Bible camps and serving in different ways because they had this opportunity to be together on a regular basis.
Another area is what we call venture or faith and work, and that has different aspects to it. One, of course, is training. What's the biblical basis for doing business the way we would like to do it? Another area is what we call mobilization. So we have in many places, I think probably in Canada as well, you think of the pyramid or the value of professions. So you have pastors at the top, and then you have doctors and nurses they're pretty good, not quite as good as the pastor, but they're pretty spiritual. And then you have teachers and homemakers, and then you have business people, and they're just one level up from the illegal professions. And that's a mentality that we often have. So we're actually working with churches and with church members to help them understand the biblical basis for work. So your work matters to God. And if you are in the call, you are an accountant or a teacher or a business person, and that's where God has placed you. How you do that is an act of worship. And so that's a part of our work. The third area is what we call developing small businesses. So we've had the privilege of working with this couple, Rudy and Gliss. They've been running a little cafe for 10 years, have had tremendous impact in their community, training young people to be baristas, and it's been a real joy to see that, to create train young people to be something other than agricultural laborers, or to be kids that say there's no hope in this country, I'm leaving, and they migrate north and try to get into the United States and earn a living there. So they're creating opportunities and creating hope with young people. And just recently, we are able to work with this young couple to help purchase a coffee roaster. And so it gives us great joy to see just taking their business to a whole other level, adding to the viability and the financial success of their own business, but also offering a service in the community. So again, there'll be some young people trained on being roasters. There'll be coffee roasted for local businesses to source their product really close by and be able to do some really cool stuff.
So the final area of focus for us is one that's really important to Bruno and I, and that's, we call it SENT. So it's really the sending out of the Canadian churches and the sending out to communities where they see faith and life worked out very differently than the culture that they're from, and then they're being sent back. So that's why we use that word sent. So obviously, people come back. You can't help but be affected when you've experienced life in a place where you don't speak the same language. You see God being worshipped very differently. It can really throw people off, and certainly your dependency on God, and somehow our ears and our hearts can often be more open to what God might be speaking into your life. That's an opportunity that comes from when we get to expose our Canadian churches to these beautiful partners that we have. And then, of course, as I said, that affects the individual person, but our hope is that in turn has an impact on the church that they represent. So for us, this has been a wonderful journey, as Linda mentioned, with Rivercross that started. We've had several of these trips, and it's been really wonderful just to listen to some of the people that spoke to me in the first service about how not only their life, they're still looking at how this has impacted them, but what they're doing in the church now and how they're being used here. So for us, it's a privilege to be able to come alongside and be a part of this journey with people. As we come to a close, just wanted to share this great commandment from Matthew 28. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. I know that as the worship team comes up and is going to share a song about the world outside our window, I just wanted to share a few of our prayer requests, which are actually out in your welcome center. But as we look at this journey that we are on together as your partners in mission, certainly your financial support is important, and we so appreciate that. Your prayer support is huge, and we feel those prayers on a daily basis, and we know there are people interceding for us and for the people that we're working with. So do pray for the staff that we care for in the Latin America region. Pray for our partners as well, because life is not easy at times for people, the context, and yet the church is wanting to be relevant. Pray for our partnerships, that we would continue to be able to be creative in how we are supporting one another to build up the local church. And please do pray for the whole SENT area, because more and more people want to have these experiences, and there's a cost to that, a personal cost and a corporate cost, but it is so worth it when you see lives impacted as we get to share with our brothers and sisters around the world. So que Dios les bendiga. Disculpe, no habla mucho español esta mañana, but it's wonderful for us to be here with you, and may God bless you all.